Here we are with the week 4 assignment, WATS 3020's DOM 1. Here you see we're at the SU Web Dev GitHub, and here's the repository for the assignment. Taking a quick look what it is, it's actually, we're going to be making a very basic web page to-do list. Now, unlike the last 2 weeks, this is the first time we're actually going to be using JavaScript in the web browser. So we're kind of moving into JavaScript is web development proper. So you see that we're actually going to do it 2 different ways. Once we're going to do it with vanilla JavaScript, and once we're going to do it with jQuery, which is a popular JavaScript library or API. And then we're also, for the third part, you're going to make some minor modifications to the list, basically add a new feature. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is fork the assignment to my own GitHub account. And then go ahead and grab the code to clone it to my home system. Make sure I'm in my code folder, and I'll do git clone. And let's see, we should be good to go. And there we have this is the contents of the folder. So anyway, before we get started, I want to take a minute to actually go over the to-do list and kind of what we're going to be doing. So let's get started with that. Before we get started with the assignment proper, I wanted to actually take a minute to go over what it is, what it's going to look like, and what the assignment is. You'll see that the README has kind of a basic explanation of what it is, but let's just go over it. That it's a to-do list where they can enter something they want to have on the list. They check and it adds it to the list, and then it has a checkbox next to it. When the user clicks the checkbox, it crosses the item out because it's complete. And the checkbox actually is like a toggle, so if you check it or uncheck it, it'll uncross it out. So this is what it looks like, right? You see that someone's already added 2 things to the list. Let's actually look at what the page looks like when it's done. And this is true for either of them. So we'll see it's a to-do list. We have the add button, we have the form, so we could type in turn in homework. When we hit add, it's now on the list. Talk to teacher. It's now on the list. Right? Read assignment. It's on the list. And for each of them, if you click the button, it crosses it off. And if you unclick it, it uncrosses it off. And one thing I also want to go over is that, so each of these things that's being added from the HTML perspective, the way it's been structured is that this is actually an unordered list, a UL. And each of these is a list item, an LI, that has 2 things is children to that LI. It has an input checkbox, and it has a label. So actually, if we go into the Chrome inspector, I want to show you what that looks like. So here we have, we don't need the head. So we have the body. This is the div to do. The form we don't care about. Here's the UL. I said it's an unordered list. It has the class to-do list. And you'll see 3 LIs. And each one is an LI, has an input with type checkbox, a label, and it says turn in homework. But you see, all it is each time we do it, and let's see it again. Read book. You'll see a new LI just appeared. And that new LI has type checkbox, label, read book. That's what we're doing with this assignment. So what we're going to be doing in both part 1 and part 2 is writing code such that when that button gets pushed, these things get added to the list. And then they have that functionality of having the cross out and the check. So anyway, let's go ahead and focus to the first one, part 1, which is doing it in vanilla JavaScript. And let's get started. So now we're going to get started on doing the to-do list using just JavaScript without using jQuery. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. Just to verify this is the HTML file we're working with. We'll see that the file index.js is already included. It's already being linked to, and there isn't actually anything for us to do here. So let's take a look at the actual JS file where there's a lot to do. So we're going to go through these in order. And so one thing that we'll see, that's the two things that are new this week are working more with events and also working with manipulating the document, the DOM. So the first thing we have to do is add an event to listen to when the DOM is ready to access. So that's actually what we're looking at. Is there's an event called DOM content loaded, which we'll see here. Here's the MDN article about it. That basically it says this event will fire when the initial HTML document has been completely loaded and parsed. So that way we're not trying to do anything like manipulate the page with content that doesn't exist yet. As you do kind of more sophisticated things, you may actually have an experience where this happens, where you're trying to grab a certain thing on the page and it just doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and see how does this work. Here they say this is basically the code we're looking for. Is we're going to say window, or we're going to use document. They both work. Dot add event listener DOM content loaded, and then we're making a new function, and then everything within it is the function that's going to run when the content loads. So what we'll do is document dot add event listener DOM content loaded. Actually, we can just do event arrow. So an arrow, and then we'll see actually the curly brace is already here for us. And there's actually a curly brace at the bottom. So now all of this is now going to happen when the content of the page loads. Is it required? Not particularly, but so let's delete that. You'll find that in some cases it really does make a difference. In some cases it doesn't. Depends on what you're doing. Okay, now we're going to add another event listener to signal that the user is submitting the form. Okay, so basically it's the same thing, but it's now going to, it's the same thing, document.add event listener, except now it's submit. Okay. Let's tab this over. So in this case, because this is the way that HTML forms work, is when the submit thing happens, it's basically a big deal, because really what it's doing is it's sending the content of the form to another page. Although we don't actually want that, we're going to use it differently. So this is actually where this next line is important. And if you haven't read up on the way HTML forms work, they're kind of an old thing that was used to do certain, like basically sending it to processors on another page. But since we don't have that, we actually want to prevent that behavior from happening, right? So it says to do add code to keep form default submit behavior from occurring. And what we'll do is when we finish this, we'll take this off to see what happens, so you can kind of see why this is important. But this is actually where we need, we have this thing, event prevent default. And this basically says, hey, don't do the thing you were normally going to do, like the default behavior. Does everything have a default behavior? Not necessarily, but there are some things that do. And because this user defined, or because this event that we're creating, or this action, it happens before the default stuff, we can just say event.prevent default. And that will prevent it from actually happening. Okay. So here we're going to see add a selector that selects the input element. So what we're doing is we're creating a new variable here called item input. And we're going to actually set it to be a reference to a specific item on the page, specifically the one whose name is item input. So let's actually take a quick look. Oh, no, didn't want to open that yet. Well, see, it doesn't do anything. Well, there's our page, by the way. We want to go to item input is actually the text box. So we're going to actually do this to be able to get what's in the text box. So let's go ahead and then, so we're going to use query selector. So let's actually go see how that works. So this is the query selector in the MDN, and you'll see that there's, this is actually it's a very expansive way to select items on a page. But specifically, looking at examples, I always like to look at examples. You'll see here that if you want to submit or grab stuff, you can actually put all sorts of things in there, right? In this case, this actually looks almost like what we want. Input name equals something. So let's do that and just change that to item, of course, there we go, item input. So now item input, the variable, is a reference to that item on the HTML page. So technically we could do all sorts of stuff with that from there, but let's go on. So you'll see this next thing is, hey, go ahead, it's grabbing the value of that. So whatever text is in that block, we're now going to have access to it. And then this, you see this code here, it tests to say, is there even anything in the box, right? Because if it's empty, then we don't really care. Other than that, we create a new item. So we want to actually create a new item, because as we discussed previously, we're going to create a new list item, and within that list item, we're going to have two things: an input checkbox and a label which has the text here. Okay, so let's say, how do we create new items? And so we use the document.create element. Okay, so if you want to see kind of how it works, it's as simple as saying document.create element and then the name of the type of element. So we can do, let's say, let new item L. I'm choosing that name because it actually comes down right here. We're actually going to add it to the list by doing this. So new item L equals document.create element list item, right? So now we need, in that list item, we need two things. We need the input checkbox and we need the label. So let's do the label first. It's going to be document.create element label. I know it's dot text. Let's see, it's item value, and we'll do new item L dot append child new label. So let's see if this does what this does. So this is right here is me creating a new label, giving it some content, and then appending it to the list item, and then that list item has already been provided, is going to be attached to the to-do list item. So as always, I'm going to go ahead and see if this actually does what we think it's doing. Okay. Let's see what our page looks like. So new list. Oh, that's not working. Oh, input is not defined. Where's that? Line 6. Oh, okay, I see. That should actually be in quotes, right? So this part right here. Okay. So basically, when it tried to get that that thing, it didn't work. So let's try again. New item. Okay, so you see now we've actually we're kind of doing the right thing here. So see if we look, we have our to-do list. And there's actually now a new list item that has a label that says the text that we entered. So it's great, except we also need the actual checkbox. Okay. So it's real quick. Just look up MDN checkbox. So it's an input item and it's a type checkbox. Okay. So good to know. Input item. So we're going to create a new item. Let's say let new check equals document.create element input. Now we need to give it the attribute, the type equals checkbox. So luckily we have set attribute. So set attribute is something you can do to any element, and you can say whatever that attribute, and the attribute can be class, it can be ID, it can be type, it can be something you create on your own. Well, actually, as we go through the rest of the quarter, we'll see instances where we create our own attributes that we reference that have no other effect. So we're going to do type and checkbox. So we'll do new check dot set attribute type checkbox, and then new item L dot append child new check. Let's see how that works. Let me pull this out of my references. So now we have the thing. So new item. So now it has a checkbox. So this is actually what we're doing. Now we can see another item, something else, stuff, cooking. So now we have our to-do list and we can check stuff off. Although, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could cross it out, which is kind of the remainder of the assignment. So now we're going to go back to this part. So at this point, we're done. All of this is done. We did this to do here. Now we just need to do this part. Oops. This part down here that actually adds a click event listener that serves as a toggle. So add click event toggle that strikes out text in label associated with a list item. So in this case, it's a little bit weird. Some of it's already been kind of some of the guidance has already been provided. So we're to do a click event. So click. So if the text decoration style on this .next sibling. So here it's saying use this .next sibling. This is on the event. It's a reference to the item that's calling the event. So it's going to be the checkbox. So we're saying the checkbox, its next sibling, which is going to be in this case the label, because the label is the next one in that part of the tree or the DOM. So now we need to know text decoration and style. So luckily, so in terms of using JavaScript to modify style, the way you'll see it done, there's various ways you can actually do it. We could use set attribute and say style, and then say enter the actual style as it would appear in line, and that works. But that's also going to override any other custom styling like that. However, we can also just refer to. You'll see here we can actually say element and then style dot color equals something. Or in this case, it's style dot. We want the text decoration because we want it to strike through. So we're going to say if this dot style dot text decoration line through. So at first we're saying, is it already lined through? Then this dot next sibling dot style dot text decoration equals else this dot next sibling dot style dot text decoration line through. So what we're saying is, if it's already got the line through style, then get rid of it. Otherwise, set it to line through. Okay, let's go take a look at our page. Stuff. Uh-oh, that did not work. First of all, we have all sorts of problems. New checkbox is not defined. So this is one of those things where the pre-provided code called the checkbox new checkbox. I called it new check. So that's easy. We'll just call it new checkbox. Okay, and okay, style of undefined. All right. Oh, that's a spelling error. Okay. All right, still not working. All right, that's. Oh, So this is always important when you're excited, you're writing your code. Double equals or triple equals are for for testing, for conditional testing. Single equals is assignment. Normally I do it the other way around, so it's funny I did it that way. Things. And finally, it crosses out and uncrosses. So there you go. We'll take a look at that real quick again. So I talked about what happens if we don't have the event default. And I want to just demonstrate that. Because like I said, HTML forms, because remember, this is an HTML form that has a submit, which you'll see that like there is nothing. This is just saying that when this button is pushed, this submits the form, and here's the form. So let's see what happens now. Stuff. Did I actually save it? Oh yeah, I have to. So let's go ahead and comment that out and see what happens. Stuff. Now you see it reloads the page, because that's what HTML forms do. Because in their mind, they're sending off this form data to another page that will then load up with a response to your form data. But that's not helpful at all. So that's why we need to use event.prevent default. But other than that, so we created the new elements, we added them to the list, we cleared that input, and then we added the new event listener for clicking to that button, and we're good. So like always now, we go to the terminal, we do git add the whole thing, finished part 1, oh, and push. And there you go. We've completed part 1 of this assignment. Okay, so now we're going to work on part 2. And part 2 is going to use the jQuery library or API, which just is a lot of functionality that was created to do the sort of things that we want to do, but really before JavaScript had kind of figured out a way to do it. So you'll see in the actual README, there's actually quite a few references to specific parts of the jQuery documentation. These are things that are going to be particular to what we're doing. So I actually have already opened all of them in a separate window. So the big thing is jQuery is the jQuery function, which is, it can be written as $. It always returns basically a jQuery object, which is kind of like an array of objects, but then all the things that all the methods in jQuery can be used on that object. So here we'll see this $div.foo is going to return a jQuery object of all of the elements that are divs with that class, with the class of foo. And then we can do stuff to it, like right here, div.foo.click function. This is saying for every div element that has the class foo, we're going to add a click event, and that event is going to find all the spans that are part of that object, and then add a class of bar to it. So it actually, like, it lets you do something that may have taken us like 6 or 7 or 8 lines in JavaScript. You can do in like 1 or 2. So it's still, you still see it a lot. Those of you that worked with Bootstrap, some of the Bootstrap templates actually use jQuery in them. Is it required? No, I mean, often you can do the same thing without jQuery. It's another tool that's out there. So we're going to get started. So it's the same exact program, just we're going to do it in jQuery. So we're going to go to our index. First of all, we want to go to index.html, and you'll see right here that the jQuery library is being added. So that's good. That's because this is what we need, and it's being done before our index.js, so that our index will be able to reference it. So, but you'll see it's a lot of the same kind of stuff. Add document ready function. So let's go take a look how jQuery does that. So .ready, and these are all different ways you can do this. What they actually recommend is this one right here. So actually, to see if the document's ready, they recommend we just do $, and then function. So that's a little bit weird, but really what we're going to write is $, function. Right. Oh, and then we need a function and then curly brace. So that works. Now we could do one of these other ones. We could do $document.ready and then the function. We could also do $document. Make sure I'm getting this right. Document.ready function. Right. These two statements are equivalent, right? So either one works, but they actually recommend this is the method you use as of jQuery 3.0. So now we have another one, to do wrap all code related to user submit. Well, You're going to see this looks awful similar to what we just did. So it's the same thing. It's $, whatever thing you want to target. In this case, we want the document, and then .submit, and then the function. Document .submit function. Right, you'll see that looks .submit function. Just so you know, when you see that function event, the idea is that all event handlers will pass an event. This is you just saying what you want to call the event. So the idea is that, so actually we'll do event, because we will do event.prevent default. But we don't need to include it in this one because we're not referencing it. Okay, so we're going to do the standard event.prevent default. I apologize, my spelling is terrible today. Okay, so get the value of the input box using jQuery. Okay, so we need to know how to select things. So in this case, it's basically the same thing. It's jQuery or $, and then you put quote square bracket attribute equals value and square bracket. So we could say let item, what will we call it? We'll call it item element equal input. I'll make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. Name equals item input. And let item value equal item element dot val. And just because I like to check things, regularly, we'll do console.log item value. Why do I do that? Because I want to make sure that works before I go running off doing something else. Okay, so you see I console logged whatever, ADDA. So it means that we've grabbed the right stuff. So it's good, okay? Just while we're here, we want to clear that item. Now, one thing we could have done, just so you know, because I want to access this item later, that's why I made a separate variable for it. But we could have actually just done let item value equal $name equals item input dot val, right? This would have been one line that would have gotten this number and just skipped over getting the separate thing. And you'll see that jQuery, you can actually do really like long chains of this kind of stuff, which we'll see in a little bit later. So just something to be aware of. That's actually one of the things about jQuery is once people get used to using it, like it lets you do some really powerful stuff really quickly. Okay, so I'm going to actually go down here just to do this part while I'm thinking about it. Item element dot val. So that's going to set it to 0. Okay, so now we're saying if item value is the same thing as before, if its length is not equal to 0. So we're going to create a new item. Now we already talked about before how what we wanted was the list item with 2 children, the input and the label. And let's see how we do that. So really in this case, oh gosh darn, what we want is append. So there's the append method is how you actually, we would normally add something to another item. But see, so this is actually where it gets, if you remember in the previous one, in the vanilla JavaScript, we created a new item, the list item, then we created the checkbox, gave it an attribute, appended that to the list item, and then created a new label, gave it the value, appended it to the list item, and then went out, found the to-do list, and then appended it to the new item to the to-do list. It was actually quite a lot of work. Now, in this case, we're going to do something that's a bit of a cheat, something we probably could have done similarly in the previous one, but because we know that this is always going to be the same block of code except for the actual text of the label, we can actually kind of skip a lot of work and do, I believe it's well, actually, what is it? I have to double check. It's to-do list. Okay, so it has the class of to-do list. To-do list. So this just selected the to-do list. Now we can append, and this is like, so we could do a similar thing where we say we're creating new stuff. But let's see if this works, because this lets us do it all in one. Because the thing is, if you insert HTML into a document, it gets processed as HTML. Oh, whoops. Whenever you're going to put quotes in quotes, always use different quotes. So I'm actually looking up, okay. Could not remember if inputs needed closing. They don't, so we're good. And then we're going to do label. Okay, so we'll see how that works. Let's actually, again, standard black out the stuff that we haven't gotten to yet. Let's see if that actually does what I think it does. See, so all of a sudden, all of that just got done. Right? And they all work exactly how we expect, except they're not being crossed out yet. So this is one where we're going to do it a little bit differently here. And part of that is because jQuery just makes it this straightforward. So what we want is to do, add the code to make this function get added to every checkbox on the change event. So colon checkbox that's a jQuery thing. So let's take a look. Get my jQuery documentation. So that's just equivalent to type equals checkbox. So what we're saying is we're going to jQuery checkbox, and this is where we see we already have the dot change. This is something that will, anytime that the element is changed, which in this case the checkbox, that's checking it. So we'll say dot change, and then the rest of it's already written here. So we're actually there's no to do in this function. It's more of us knowing to do the checkbox.change. And so what this is actually doing is it's going to select every checkbox and give it this code that's very similar to what we did before. Is if it's checked, then line through it. If it isn't checked, then remove the line. And this is all jQuery. So you see, instead of next sibling like we did with JavaScript, it chooses a sibling that's a label and then adds the CSS text decoration line through. A little bit different, but basically the same thing. Let's see if it works. Let's see, check. Okay. So now the one thing that is interesting about this, and that it's good to understand, is that the previous one, the JavaScript one, only added an event to the new item we create every time we hit the add button, right? So if you add 7 items to the list, each time you add an item, it only adds an event to one thing. This, on the other hand, jQuery is going through and adding the event every time to each item. It's basically resetting it or setting a new event. Why is that relevant? Well, it's not. It's just good to know. If you tried to do something that was specific to each checkbox when you did that event, this wouldn't be the right way to do it unless you wrote the code differently. So yeah, so there we go. There's the to-do list with jQuery. So since we're done, make sure we're saved. We go over and and we push it. And that completes the jQuery part 2. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the third part of the assignment, which is doing the list from part 1 or part 2, but with an added feature. So we'll take a look here that we use either the vanilla JavaScript or the jQuery version as a starting point, copy that over, and then modify it such that when you click the list to indicate done, it moves it to a separate done list that we're going to add to the HTML. It doesn't need to be in the form. It doesn't change. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here with the vanilla JavaScript version. So the first thing I want to do is grab all these files, hit copy, go over to the folder here and paste. So now I've just copied it. So right now, if I open in my live server, here I've got the to-do list. It's exactly like it was. So if we think about it, what do we want to do? We want to add a list at the bottom here that says done. And then as these get checked, instead of leaving it here and crossing it out, it's just going to take it and move it down to the bottom. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's work on that. So first of all, let's go to the HTML file. So we're going to need a done list. I'm not going to make this super complicated. I'm just going to add a done list. Oops. Done list. And then I'm going to give it an unordered list. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to give it an ID of done list. And we'll see why, because I'm going to introduce a different JavaScript method than what we used in part 1. So there, my index is ready. I've got a done list with an ID of done list. So now we'll go to our JavaScript. So all this is going to be the same, right? All the adding stuff. It's this part down here that I want to change. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is comment this out for now, because I don't think I want to keep it at all, but you never know. So now what do we want to do? I want to add to that unordered list, and I want it just to have the task. I don't want to keep the checkbox, because what's the point of having a checkbox on a done list? You just want to, this is meant to be a record of things that you've done. So first of all, we need to actually get the actual text. So we're going to say let text item equal this dot next sibling, which we learned previously, dot text content. So text item is now equal to whatever the text of that label was. Okay. So we'll do let done item equal document dot create element li. And we'll say done item dot text. Ooh, that was not right. Done item dot text content equals text item, and then let's not even do that. We'll say document dot. This is where we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to say document get element by ID. It's very similar to the query selector, but this is only by ID, and the idea is it only returns a single item, because in theory, there's only one item with an ID. We're going to say done list dot append child done item. So let's see what this does. Okay, so now we have a thing on the done list. Now, this is kind of what I was looking for, right? And if we have other thing, it's on the list. But there's a problem. These things are now sitting on the to-do list. Like, I don't want them there, right? This shouldn't be here. So let's actually get rid of that. So how do we remove that? Well, I already have, you'll see here it says it's for a child node, which is something that's a child to a parent. Removes the object from the tree it belongs to. So we can actually do this dot. Now, let's think about what this is. We've referenced it a few times. This is actually the checkbox, right? Because that's what has the event tied to it, is the checkbox. So this is the checkbox. I could remove the checkbox, right? And let's see what happens. Right? It's going to be a little spooky. Not spooky, but right? All of a sudden the checkbox disappears, but then this is still there. And actually, if we look, what we'll see is the list item and the label remain. Well, I don't want any of that. So I need to get the parent. So actually, but as it ends up, that's a thing we can do. We can do parent element, oops, dot remove. So now it'll remove the list item and all of its children. Boop. And so now we have the done list is there. Now this technically meets the intent. One thing, we could do some stuff where we realize maybe we didn't need to do nearly much stuff. For example, maybe I could just do this, right? Just remove that extra variable altogether, see if this works. Still does. But, you know, everything else here is pretty much what needs to be there. And there you go. That is part 3 of the assignment. Now, this is one where you'll see that this was done real quick. There may be other things you want to do. Maybe you want to style it more. Maybe you want to add more stuff. And that's actually, this is an opportunity for you to do that. Like maybe you don't like the standard bullet. Maybe you want to give it go into the style sheet, add some class stuff. But this works kind of as expected. And we'll see that as we complete things, it goes to our done list. And that'll just keep getting bigger while this page is open. So now we're going to go ahead and we have to go to the terminal, which of course I don't have a window open, so we'll just do that. And we'll do git add, git commit, finished part 3, and git push. And with that done, that completes part 3. Now, if you want to do it in jQuery, it's going to be a little bit different. But also, this is actually a good opportunity where if you want to do something crazy and creative, feel free, right? If you think it'd be really neat if there's a done list and maybe other lists, like this is the first real assignment where, like, I think you have an opportunity to go kind of outside the confines of the assignment. I think the biggest one is styling the done list is something you can do, but feel free to do whatever you like. But other than that, that completes the assignment 4. Just be sure that when you're done to go into Canvas and turn it in with a link to your repository and also a link to the GitHub Pages page. So one thing I've not demonstrated in this is actually turning on the GitHub Pages, but we can do that right now, just in case any of you forgot. So I'll go to my, my account. And we'll go to the page here, go to settings. We'll go down here to GitHub Pages, and we'll say choose the master branch. And then after a short period of time, this will pop up as a page we can visit. It's currently not because it takes a little while to load, but that's just, you want to make sure you turn that on so that'll be something that'll be able to be seen through a web browser. But other than that, that completes assignment 4.